Hello, welcome to the studio. My name's Marcus, and today we're going to be doing a glass flower implosion. But first, I want to just go over some artists that have inspired me getting to this point, as well as how I discovered this way of doing this technique. Now, if you're not interested in all of that, don't worry about it. You can just look up here. I'm going to put some information. You can go to that point in the video and watch me blow glass. Yeah, first off, I just want to acknowledge three artists, really, that have inspired me doing this kind of technique. The first one would be John Kabuki. A lot of you probably already know him, but he's an amazing glass artist in borosilicate. He does these beautiful flowers, and he's also an educator in the space. So he has some videos with Corning, and he shows people how to make these flowers. The first one that I saw would have been probably 12 years ago, and it was just awesome to have this video to refer to as a glassblower starting out, and I loved the technique and just kept on doing it. So thank you, John, for all that knowledge. The second artist I want to mention would be Jared DeLong. Now Jared DeLong was probably the first borosilicate artist that I saw who was putting flowers into the side walls of pieces. And he would do that in a variety of different forms, but just beautiful flowers. And I was always wondering, I'm like, how does he get them in there? And I tried a bunch of stuff and I couldn't figure it out, but I discovered other things through that, and he was always an inspiration. So props to Jared. And then the last person I want to mention is Paul Stankert, and Paul was really instrumental in making me see the larger possibilities when it comes to floral glass scenes. And his work is, it's world renowned, and but he's also a really nice guy, and I got the pleasure to meet him when I was going to school in New Jersey at Salem Community College, and he would come by the school and he would just help people out and show them techniques, and lovely human being. So thank you, Paul. Now, I just want to talk a little bit about how I figured out this way of doing this technique. So essentially, I saw the John Kabuki video and loved what he was doing with the Flower Implosions. And later on, I was doing these reticellos, really tight line work stuff, and I saw people who were compressing them into little pendants and stuff and lensing them very, very nicely. And so I wanted to do that, and I was like, okay, let's we'll try the reticello pendant thing. And the more I tried to compress them down, the more I realized that they also kind of bloomed out, even though it was a tube. And I'd also seen this with a couple other glassblowers who were doing micro dots and stuff of that nature. And they could really implode them quite far into the tubing. So eventually, I was doing these flowers, these Kabuki style solid compression flowers, and I'd been doing them for years, and finally was getting kind of good at them. But I was struggling to get them as large and as deep as I wanted them to be, and so I was looking for other ways to do a similar technique. And eventually, I was doing these reticellos, and one of them compressed really badly and kind of bloomed itself out. And I was like, I bet I could do this with the flowers. So I gave it a shot. I just drew the petals and the leaves on the bubble, let it condense back down, and it totally worked. So ever since then, I've just been trying to extend that out. And I think I've got at least one lensing technique that I'll show you guys in this video that really helps with that process, and also, just the way that you can kind of picture, how you can make this flower on a tube can be challenging to describe. So I hope this video helps you guys. I really appreciate you sitting through this talk, and yeah, if you stuck with me, enjoy the video. Hi there, thanks for stopping by. My name's Marcus Barnes, and I blow glass. Today we will be making a flower implosion. I've been working on this technique for a long time, and I think it's time to share it. Today I'll be using a didymium filter on my camera, which basically blocks out a lot of the sodium flare as well as some of the UV. So we're going to begin by prepping some tubing. And we're just going to pull a point from that. If you're curious about how to do this technique, check out my point pulling video. And we will blow a little hole in the end here. We can clean up the end of our tube, just make it a little bit smaller here where that nipple is. We're going to want to heat up that whole section and blow it out nice and even with the wall weight of the rest of the tubing. This is set up for the area that we're going to be drawing our petals on. Alright, now we can start bringing some heat into the back wall of this tube. We're going to want to thicken up this wall a little bit, as well as blow it out. You can really take your time bringing the heat into the piece, and use gravity so that it falls back on itself and gets a little bit thicker as you're warming it. Alright, we're going to blow that out, not too much, and keep it pretty even. And we're going to heat up the wall weight just past that, start blowing out the tip, ideally to the same size as what's behind it. Pausing in between blows really allows the thin parts of the glass to cool quicker than the thick parts, and then you can add more air and blow out what's thick, and really helps you even it out. And this is the area we will be drawing our petals on. We want this nice and thin so that when we go to implode it, it all shrinks back down and becomes small. So we're going to go ahead and do some gold fuming. Check out my fuming video if you're interested in the technique involved in this. We're going to apply this gold to our bubble. Just allow that spray of gold to cover the glass and make sure that we do a nice even coat. It really is just an experience thing to get the right amount of gold fume onto the glass. And different amounts will give you different effects, so it's not one size fits all. I'm really looking for that metallic tone. Nice deep pink or purple. And we can also use the tip of the torch to polish off some of that gold fume and bake it in to change the color.
We're going to use isopropyl 99 to clean off our color rods. And we're going to use striking China White and Jade Green from North Star. This Jade Green will bubble if you warm it up too quickly, so start far out in the flame and use an oxidizing flame. Slowly bring it up to temperature and you'll avoid the worst of it. I like using layers of colors because I feel like it's a little bit more natural. We're going to heat in the edges of those lines, and this way it will accept the green glass that we will apply next without leaving any air in between. You can see those bubbles in that green glass. It'll be alright. So we'll just give that a good soak. Alright, let's get that super hot and just get it in between there. I like using a little circular motion to disconnect the glass there. Get it nice and hot and make our connection. Good prep makes good pieces, so taking our time with this, making sure that it all works just how we want it to. Can do a little back and forth wiggle there to help weld those sections together. We'll cook in all that color and make it nice and homogeneous. I like to touch the tip a bit so it cools and then begin my pull. Nice. And if you were looking carefully, you can see there's a couple bubbles in that stringer. I would avoid using those sections of the stringer on a really nice piece, but if you're just practicing flowers, it's not a big deal. Here we'll pull out some white. And this China White is so fun. Look how it strikes. It changes, goes from clear to white as you warm it up. Get it floppy floppy and pull it out. And I like to have a combination of both thick and thin stringers. We'll use the thin ones at the beginning of the flower and the thicker ones at the back end, and it gives a nice gradient and looks really nice. There's our prep. We'll try and stay organized. And here we come in for our first petals. We'll have them interlock. And then around those two interlocking petals, we will add 3 more interlocking petals. And this part of the implosion is almost line for line the same as a John Kabuki implosion. So thank you, John. And here we're going to add 5 interlocking petals. Always work in odds when it comes to nature. You can see the bubble is so thin that the surface of the glass actually starts to collapse as I lay these lines, and that's what you want. You want to kind of be riding the line of what's possible. No pun intended. It's interesting, you can also see some metallic tones forming on the surface of that gold fume that we've applied because of the different flame chemistries. Oxidizing will avoid that more than reducing. So here we go, we're going to come back in and do another layer of lines. Same technique as before. I think it's so beautiful the way that that gold fume lights up when you connect that glass to it. Alright, we're continuing to just maintain that heat base with flashes throughout the process. Choosing the right size stringer for the job. We're pretty far out now, so I want something thicker. And this will just kind of give those outside petals a little bit more body to them. And I like to kind of make the petal go out at the tip, in the center, and then back in. It kind of makes the petal fold outwards in the center of it, almost like gravity is pulling it down or age is pulling it down. And if you run out of room or anything, it's fine, just kind of sneak one in there. Add some air if you need it. A lot of the time those lines will collapse down as you're applying them, so blowing consistently throughout the process as you're warming it up is necessary. And we will begin laying our leaves. Alright, so the thicker part of this rod is actually at the tip because of how I pulled it down. So I'm going to start with the outside leaf. Leaves? Leaves? I don't know. Leaves. Yeah, leaves. Then we're going to do our inside ones. That thinner glass, and adding some air because it probably fell in on me there. Alright, that's looking good. So now we just want to put a whole bunch of heat into those lines, kind of cook them in, make sure that they're kind of melted into the piece. And we also want to build a gradient of heat from the back of the piece to the front of the piece, with most of the heat in the front of the piece at the end of it. But right now it's going to be most of the heat in the back. If we start putting heat on that front, it's going to start falling in immediately, and that's actually what we want. So we're just going to maintain that fall, keeping the tip of the flower the hottest. Nice even rotation, and trying to keep the tip of the flower in the center of that tube throughout this process. Nice even heat gradient coming back, continuing to allow that flower to get sucked down real small. I'll even let it go concave like that sometimes. It's all about controlling the fall. And at this point, the flower is already starting to bloom. Now, once you start to lose the wall weight behind it, it does become more challenging to control the inside of the piece. And you don't want that lens to connect with the tube side. So what you'll see me do here is compress. This is to control the piece. Now we're going to heat up that side wall. It's a little bit uneven, so I'm going to compress again and add some air. And center it as I'm adding air. So now we're back on center. And we're going to go ahead and heat up the back wall of that tube. We're going to try and bring that back wall down into the more bulbous part of the tube. So we'll add some air and push down. Warm up the area that needs to be blown out. Add that air and center it while you're doing so. And we're just focusing on finding center here. So I'm going to warm up the side wall of the tube, give it another marver, make sure everything's really even, heating it up, taking it out of the flame so that the heat dissipates throughout the glass. Nice. Now we can go back to our implosion. I'm feeling pretty safe about the lens of that glass not making contact with the interior wall of the tube. So really putting a bunch of heat in there, focusing it especially on where those outside leaves are, because that's the glass that we want to fall down and join in with the center. We're also pulling clear from the side of that tubing into that petal area, or into that leaf area, I should say. So really warming up those leaves and allowing that tube to kind of fall back on itself using gravity. So lots and lots of heat, using gravity to let it fall. A little bit of a compression, and this will cool the base of the glass, allowing me to put more heat into that side wall where I really want it. Little back and forth bounce in the flame really helps to get that concavity going. A lot of gravity action going on here, letting it fall down inside of that tube. Right, and then that clear on the wall is being pulled into that base as it's falling. As we continue, our drawn petals and image on the base will get smaller and smaller. We can compress and rotate, allowing it to get even smaller. And once it gets small enough, we're ready to remove what's left of that color on the bottom. You can see it's just a fraction of the size that it was before. So we'll heat up just the surface glass and remove that color glass that's exposed to the surface. It's come to the end of its life. We don't want to warm up the image underneath the glass. We just want to get the surface of the glass hot enough to remove that little layer. So just the surface, just massage that heat in there. Once you can stick it and swipe it. Beautiful. We're just going to remove all of the remaining glass there off the tip. This leaves us with our beautiful little leaves there encapsulated under the clear. And they're nice and safe because they're under the clear. So now we're going to do probably the hardest process in this whole video, which is back lensing. Now, this is something that I'm sure other glass blowers do, but I've only ever seen it in quartz shops where they're doing quartz welding. What we're going to do here is get the glass very hot on the connection point and the rod, and then put that rod in there and spin it evenly without getting any bubbles. You want to keep both the base material and the rod warm enough to accept each other. But you don't want the base material so warm that the flower gets distorted. So you've got to flash back and forth, massaging that heat into the upcoming glass, and keep that rod spinning at all times so that you don't get any hot bubbles. If you overcook the glass, it will boil, so you have to keep that rod moving. Now that we've got that clear glass on the back and our image is better protected, we can start using marvers. We're just going to bring this piece into a shape that's acceptable for us to add more glass to it. We're going to do this lensing at least 2 more times. And depending on the size of your desired piece, you can kind of choose, but I like to do it multiple times. So we'll put a lot of heat into the back. We'll remove just the center of that implosion because it will actually help to pull out the flower where we want it. Now we can add some more clear using that rotation method, back and forth flashing, keeping the rod hot, keeping the piece hot, avoiding heat bubbles. And then sometimes what I like to do is heat the bottom, marver it out, heat the bottom, marver it out, and then use a rod to actually pull the flower out from the base. And this will allow us to shape the back side of the flower and give us a nice stem, as well as define the depth of this implosion. We're going to get this whole thing nice and even. Maybe apply some graphite. Then we'll lens again. This is that same spinning motion. Alright, and when you're happy with how much glass you have on the back, you can punty up and we will remove our tube. So I just heat up a thin band of glass right at the edge of the implosion in the tube, get that nice and hot and blow it out, and then whisk away any extra glass that's on the shoulder of that implosion. So we're just going to take the time to remove any glass that's got bubbles in it or scuzz. Make sure the shape is right, and then we'll go ahead and start preparing to lens this. It's important that you've got the shape you want with regards to roundness and all of that before you lens. Looking pretty good. So whenever I'm using thick glass rod, I like to attach it to glass tubing. So this is some glass tubing I'm using as a handle. I'll just attach this chunk of rod on there. So this is some old rod that's been laying around the studio for a while, and as a result it has scratches on the surface. We don't want to be using scratched glass for any of our marbles. So we're going to gather this up and use a skimming technique to remove that damaged glass on the surface. And make sure that you're cleaning everything with isopropyl beforehand. So here we go. We're just going to remove just the surface of this glass. We're grabbing just a small amount and then skimming it off. This will take some practice and will cost you some material, but it's worth it. Make sure that you're occasionally cooling your tweezers. You don't want them to stick. Now that we have our glass completely cleaned, we're just going to make sure it's a nice homogeneous shape. I'll remove the tip because sometimes it's hard to skim that. And we will begin the lensing process. Our goal here will be to get our large piece of clear glass very hot and to only get the surface of our implosions glass hot enough to accept this material. The hotter that we can get our clear glass lens before we make our attachment, the better it's going to be. And you want those connection points to both be white hot so that it'll flow evenly. Take your time. Now you can only keep this hot for so long before the base image will start to distort, so you really have to get on it and get off of it quite quick. Then just allow the piece to cool. Try and allow all of the color to escape the piece if possible. The cooler that the inside of the piece is, the easier it will be to roll that lens over top of the flower without distorting it. Well, we're at the final stages, and here really it's dealer's choice. You can turn it into a marble or a cab or whatever you feel like. In this case, I'm just going to make a marble because it seemed the simplest thing to do for the demonstration. We're just going to go in there a couple times, true it up. And that's basically it.
Hey guys, I really appreciate you taking this time to watch this video. It took a long time to make, so I hope you liked it. If you did, hit that like button. It'll let YouTube know that it was worth watching. And if you want to see more content like this, you can subscribe to the channel. I've also got an Instagram account, Marcus Barnes Glass on Instagram, and I post the work that I make there, so if you're interested in that, that's where you'll find it. And I also just made a Patreon account. So if you want to support the channel in a different way, you can go there. Ask me questions. I love to hear from you guys. Thank you so much for your time. Alright, see you in the next one.